Good morning, everyone. Thank you to the previous panelists and all the previous speakers also for the context setting and for the great insights also. Um, the previous session was about decoding, Gen X, Gen Y, Gen Z consumers and get an understanding of what their likings are. I think the report also does a great job of giving some of those insights. Um, Sitting with some of the market leads over here in front of me, I'll take the conversation a little more further, right? While we understand with respect to users and how they are, um, on a marketing side, I want to understand some of the key aspects in terms of taking an extension of understanding these user segments also. Um, we are totally into technical terms, right, with respect to reaching out to these audiences. But I think one key aspect is cultural nuances of this India. Like how it was just mentioned earlier, India is a country of many Indias. Um, what do these cultural nuances mean for this particular diverse user segments that we have? Amita, if you can just help me in starting off with what role does cultural understanding play in catering to these diverse user segments?
Yes, thank you, and good afternoon, everybody. I'm happy to be here. Look, when we look at cultural diversities, I mean, the role that it really plays is it helps you sort of uh, get familiarized yourself to the consumer. Okay, so when you are speaking in a certain way, you are trying to be part of consumers' certain cultural points or belief points that they care about. The brand becomes much more familiarized. The acceptance for the brand is much higher. Repeat purchase is much higher. What it also does is that cultural nuances help you to get, or rather get more and more occasions to tap into. So, for example, specifically in our kind of industry, let's say the best cultural nuance could be food and our beverage. I mean, that's one of the biggest leverage point that we have. So imagine if now, and most of the times we also do that, which is we give enough and more visual cues to our consumers to have our beverage along with food. But we serve across India. So that means that one kind of food and a beverage, that combination certainly will not work. So we will have to sort of identify which food and which beverage and what kind of that assortment will really become cult. So for example, a biryani and a thumbs up, it becomes cult in Hyderabad, it becomes cult in South. But the same combination may not really work maybe in North or in East. So that understanding what really works in a specific region and then really smartly putting your brand, I think these kind of opens up new opportunities and new occasions. Yeah.
All right. Avinash, I'll just ask you also on the same lines. Being part of the travel sector, I think in a country over here which has got so many aspirations within India and outside India also, so when you have to cater to such folks, I also, I was following the Thomas Cook piece also, and I saw how we are also catering to now stays for the Coldplay concert in Abu Dhabi, right? So if you're out there, we have options for you also right now. So with all of these user segments that we have right now, especially in the travel sector, do cultural nuances play a big role?
Hello. Yeah, thank you. I think, I mean, just to add on to what you said, it actually makes a big difference. In fact, most of our products, and when I mean products, in our case, products are essentially destinations. So whether it is, and we are big across Europe, we are big across US, Asian. So when we, and I'll take a simplest example of say Singapore, the package designed for Singapore, same 4 or 5 nights or 5 days, or when it is designed for somebody for West India, is very different from what we design it for somebody in the South or in say East. And all of that, right from the time of the kind of tour managers or the people who deal with them at the stores, or people who actually take care of them while they are on the ground. And food, I think food, I mean, over the years, we've learned that food plays such an important part of the holiday, that the kind of restaurants we take them to, also changes from culture to culture. Serving local food, after a point, while it sounds cool, that okay, I want to explore local cuisine, and everybody thinks, okay, if I'm going to Singapore, I have local food, I'll have Thai food, that, all that. But we've realized after a point, that coolness stays only for 2 days. After 2 days, everybody starts craving for their own butter chicken, dal, or whatever your local staple is. Hence, actually, our tours are designed in such a way that after 2 or 3 days, you have to serve an Indian meal. Otherwise, people genuinely start going crazy. The amount of complaints that we have that we don't get, the dal here doesn't taste the same as what the dal taste is crazy.
Yeah.
So I think that plays a huge role, and like you said, culture and understanding of where they come from, the kind of language we speak to them, right from the time we start talking to them for a sales pitch to what we deliver on the ground, is completely different. And obviously that reflects to a great extent in terms of how you market to them also. So if you visit our store, say in Kolhapur, while the store design and decor might more or less be similar, but the language is completely customized. The messaging is very different in Kolhapur versus what it would probably be in Guntur down south. So
Well, yes,
that also is completely tweaked to the tastes and behavior
I think it
of
also
the
comes down to when brands actually go ahead and coin terminologies or comms and a thought, right, for the brand also, the entire impact of vernacular is really important in terms of how does this travel through across India, right? And in terms of if there is a line that is cracked over here which sounds great in English, but what is the effect of it in Hindi, Marathi, Gujarati, and all of those pieces? That's where it needs to go to.
I think those days are gone. I mean, I come from advertising, and 10 years ago, although obviously I left it long ago, but obviously still deal with advertising. There was a time when most creatives, and people will bail me out here, they actually thought in English, and it was always translated, which is why I think some of the great names in advertising earlier always thought that always think in Hindi or think in the local language, then it will do well. Thinking in English and then actually trying to translate it to local language doesn't work anymore.
Absolutely. All right. So, since the entire objective of our session also is challenges and opportunities, I think as marketers, it's also important for all of us to know there really are challenges in terms of marketing to diverse user segments also. So I'll probably just start off with Ashish, if you can just help us with some inputs on what challenges do you face when trying to customize marketing approaches to specific user segments versus the age-old one-size-fits-all approach?
The big one is, first of all, trying to figure out what you don't want to cater to. Okay, because, for example, whether it is in telecom or whether it is energy distribution, in both the cases, at the end of the day, you're catering to all consumers, and hence to be able to say no to a particular segment or how much of micro segmentation are you wanting to do is extremely critical, because beyond a point there will be no ROIs if you keep doing micro segmentation, because you also need to then invest in those creatives, invest in all of that, and at the end of the day we do all of this to be able to generate revenues. So the one big challenge from, or rather I'll put this into three buckets. Okay, one is from a segmentation standpoint, what do you segment, how much do you segment? That's the first challenge. The second challenge is, once you do all this segmentation, how do you create content for it, right? And the third challenge is, how do you then measure the efficacy of these campaigns and stuff like that? So I would put them into these three broad categories. In the first one, when you're doing segmentation, and somebody was talking about many Bharatiyas and so on and so forth. In every human being, he's part of multiple segments. Which segment do you cater to? Which segment do you not cater to? So, like you were saying, I might want to go to Singapore and hence might be part of one cohort. I might like my butter chicken and hence might be part of some another cohort, and so on and so forth. I would want to do online, but like the previous panelist was saying, I might also want to go and see offline in certain other segments. So that complexity is a challenge. How do you sort of cater to that? And to what level do you want to deep dive into it? So those are two from a segmentation standpoint. From a content creation standpoint, how do you make it relevant? Not only from what content appeals to people, but also what is the channel of delivery of that content. I might want to have a particular or consume a certain content or certain advertising or certain marketing campaigns on a particular platform and like it. On some others, I might not like the same thing, right? I might like something on LinkedIn, not like it on Insta, and vice versa. Yeah, because both the, yes, the Gen Z is definitely more on Insta, but it is not like as if the millennials are not there. They are also there, but their tastes are very, very different. So that's the second part. And the last and the most important part of this is, earlier on we knew when you were segmenting, okay, this is the size of the cohort, this is what is the investment required, this is the sort of I'm going to get. But today, it's no more something that you're going to do beforehand and then deploy. You make rules and those rules deploy automatically, and hence those cohorts keep changing. So to be able to really pinpoint and say, okay, this is what I got from this, from a particular consumer, might not be directly, how do I put it? It's not easy for you to measure. Hence, you will have to do a lot of attribution, right? So your attribution models need to be time tested and so on and so forth. So to my mind, these three would be the buckets of challenges.
Right. Avinash, any inputs, anything to add on to that from your end?
Over and above what he said, what we actually sort of struggle, and I'm assuming there are industry folks here, tech agency sides who can sort of, I'm sure they're all working towards it, is like you said, we cater to people in their 20s also, the cold plate tickets and those kind of which is really younger. At the same time, we actually have almost 25% of our consumers are more than our senior citizens. So they are like chalk and cheese completely. The kind of media they consume is very different. User behavior is very different. The kind of OTT platforms or social platforms there are very different. Language is very different. And we have more than, at any given point of there, we have more than 100 SKUs to be promoted. So now 100 SKUs, so many of these campaigns running at the same time across the 20-year-old to 60-year-old, and so many platforms, and the fact that people expect everything to be personalized. No, there is no one size fits all. Everything has to be personalized to that. So doing creatives at scale in so many at a single point of time and delivering them to the local nuances is a big challenge that we actually currently struggle with. So there's only so much you can do in so much time and manually.
Correct.
So I think that's one real challenge that we grapple with on a day-to-day basis.
Okay, all right. So since I got to hear that, there are multiple channels out there and you'll find everyone out there, maybe it's not the answer is that only Gen Zs are on Insta, but there's a purpose for everyone. But I'll take that conversation again and ahead, because maybe not on a digital aspect also, but since being market leaders and CMOs in your respective, places, across all the channels that are there out there to reach to these particular user segments, how do you determine the best communication channels for each of those segments? And obviously there might be overlaps here and there, but at least in your experience you must have got, in your personal capacities where you're working, you must have had experience in terms of there are communication channels that serve really well for certain user segments. Sapna, if you can just help me in, starting off that piece.
Sure. Good afternoon. Nice to be here on this panel. Very interesting discussions. And before I really get to that specific answer, I wanted to dial back on, I think, the previous panel. And there was this perception of Gen Z, the millennials being more. So I head marketing, and I've been in financial services for the last many years. And traditionally, there's this whole concept that millennials are the key. Married, 35. That's your key segment with families. We've recently explored this further, and the Gen Z or the Gen X out here, which now constitutes more than 50% of the population. There was a research that we did that 70% of them are really looking at financial services with new eyes and really savvy about products in the financial markets. So we recently did a campaign around this, which was specifically targeted to the young adults. And that was quite a case study, and it's there, available. And it was also very productive from a business point of view. So coming back, and I think we can speak about that a little more later, but I'll go specific to your question. So for that campaign that we did, we had a completely different channel medium. It was a separate brand, like the brand Manipal Signa caters right from, 28 to 60. But the channel of communication to a segment of 28 to say 32 or 35, is very different to a channel of communication to a 35 to a 50 and 50 plus. So it's completely segmented, and and we reached, of course, digital is the mainstay, but digital is again got many stances, right? So which pages, which influencers, which content pieces are you dialing up on? So I think by just saying digital is no longer, digital itself is segmented. So because everybody is on digital, right? The millennials on digital, the Gen Z, and everybody, even my mom is on digital, my daughter is on digital. So I think that itself is a means where you go to segment by the conversations that are happening. I think that was a key learning that we had.
Amita, can you just add in from your experience at Coke?
Sure. So we look at different objectives. We look at, let's say, I mean, all campaigns, different cohorts will be at a certain different point where we see that, okay, there certain consumers we would want to acquire, or certain channels we would want to say that, okay, this channel really helps me to acquire. So for example, e-commerce. Now, e-commerce is a great way for us to acquire new consumers. A lot of impulse purchase happens on quick commerce. So for us, we look at channels, first we look at what is the objective of the campaign, or what is it that I'm trying to do. And then we really try and pick, okay, this channel probably might serve if it's a new consumer acquisition, or if it is just about brand awareness, or if this is just about repeat purchase. The matrix that we also look into is, again, according to what objectives we are setting up. However, eventually we want to see that whatever effort we have made, has that helped us in getting a repeat buying? Has that helped us in making sure the consumer has, is there a form of brand love that is generating for us? So while the objectives can be different in a tactical way, eventually we want to see whether that is really leading into repeat buying.
Okay, all
Yeah.
right. So what I'll do is right now since we are all from different, we are talking about user segments, but we all ourselves are from different categories. I'd like to open the floor, to each one of you to actually just describe one use case, where identifying a particular user segment led to certain insights and the success that you got with respect to it, or maybe not to a single one, but some case study at your end which gave you a lot of insights in terms of this is how India behaves and this is how the performance was from success, or even learnings in terms of something didn't work out. So if I can just open the floor to each one of you to just give your individual one small case study to get an understanding. Sapna, if you can just begin with it.
Sure. So I think I'll speak about the same
Yes.
case study that I actually mentioned earlier. I mean, if I have to really think about it, in the last 1 year, we've had two such things that really worked for our business. So from a health insurance perspective, what we really, our goals is to get new to health consumers. Now, when I say new to health consumers, we don't typically, it's not profitable for the business always to get a person who's already had health insurance and wants to shift. Of course, that's part of your portfolio. But, major objective is to get healthy, new to health consumers. Okay, so I'm just kind of laying the ground of the business objective. From that perspective, a lot of consumers in the age segment of 35 to 40 already have some form of health cover, either corporate or, or they've already had some cover. The age segment, which is the young adults, typically not targeted, by the market, is actually a very profitable segment. I mean, of course, there are cases of high accidents, and there is one story of that. But largely, if that consumer segment stays with you and evolves with you, it is a profitable segment. So that was the genesis of what we were trying to achieve. Of course, the challenges there is very short attention spans in that segment, being a financial services product, relevance was very important. How relevant do we make a health insurance to a person who's just starting, his or her career? I think that was another challenge, or opportunity rather. I think towards that, what we did was that, okay, as a brand, we'll have to definitely look at this segment differently. We cannot apply the same rules of communication. So we had a brand ambassador that we had, already signed up with, Manoj Bajpai, and we had a brand proposition which was working at some level at 35 and above. We did not use that same proposition, strategy, etc. in this segment, and went with a completely different campaign and touch points, largely focusing on the whole concept of that, adulting is what they were doing, right? Getting into adulting and making health insurance an essential part of their adulting journey. And that was the large, aspect. And, using stories and relevant ideas from their life of adulting, say budgeting, or, talking about, taking care of their parents, because that's the segment suddenly they start thinking about their parents' health. So queuing into a lot of this relatable, dealing with maids, and, these normal adulting issues. We got in and started speaking in that conversation zone. And, and the case study is available online if you look it up. So largely in terms of ROI, that led to a traffic jump of almost 30% coming to us from this segment. So we segmented, so we had a before after. So we had a jump of traffic. Our business from this segment has increased. And of course, we have to be consistent at keeping it that way, because honestly, it's short term. And it's a profitable segment that we have, that we are building.
Sure. Right.
So yeah,
Thanks.
Thank you.
Ashish, Avinash, either one of you? Yeah.
So just to give you a little background, I'm sure most people will be aware of it. Thomas Cook, largely because we've been around for more than 100 odd years in India and globally, typically we've always been perceived as a slightly older man's brand. If you talk to a 20-year-old today, most of them would reply, okay, my father used to travel with, or travels with this. So it is like almost like a father's brand, which is fine, because our actually core strength is entire holiday packages and not selling components like, say, a Make My Trip or other OTAs where they sell single components. We sell the whole package, and our strength is in geographies like Europe, US, Australia, Africa. So, and these are long holidays, so anywhere between 8 to 10, 12, 15 days. So typically, an average family spends anywhere between 8 to 10 lakh rupees with us. So by design, our products and the brand was more relevant for slightly older people. So our median or average age would be 40 plus or 45 earlier. But pandemic came and suddenly changed all of that. Obviously, travel was decimated for 6 months or almost a year. But as things started opening up, what we realized is the geographies that we were operating in, they were not open, they were not welcoming tourists, and our core TG, which is slightly older, were cautious and conscious of not traveling. So they were not even thinking of travel. Travel was the least thing on their mind. It was more about getting back to life as usual. But at the same time, younger consumers were actually frustrated sitting at home for almost a year or more than that. And they were itching to go out. They were more adventurous in nature. And hence, that was the only market which was available. So it was both sides. My consumers were not traveling. The geographies that I operate were probably not open. So we had to actually change the whole dynamics of how we operated and what we did. Business model itself had to go through a shift where we actually started curating products which was largely appealing to these younger consumers. Coldplay is one of the examples of things like that. So we started focusing on shorter geographies. We started focusing on India as a business. We were not very big on India. So we did all of that, curated a list of products which were literally called for Gen Zs, product Gen Zs, and at the same time, then we had to even create the campaign. So this was on the product side where we had to change the way the business itself functioned, and then obviously marketing came in and tried to market these products, choose the platforms where these people, consumers were, and that whole experience, I'm not saying that it happened immediately, it took us almost more than a year or two, and 4 years after that, now 35% of our consumers are less than 30.
Nice.
So, and it is a 3-4 year journey, but pandemic actually almost came like I shouldn't say this because, but it almost came like
many
a
forms,
blessing in
blessing in
disguise, where the organization transformed and transformed for better and became more digital and maybe younger in nature, and that's the way we see it going forward.
Well, I think
because more and more younger
the digital
consumers are
adoption,
traveling.
the digital adoption just went skyrocketed.
Absolutely,
like, after
absolutely,
that.
yeah.
Ashish?
Yeah. So, see, to my mind, for any segment, for you to make inroads into any segment, what is extremely important is what is the insight you have pertaining to that particular segment. So, for example, let's say youth. Everybody will say youth is a segment, women is a segment, senior citizen is a segment. But what's the insight that you get from there, right? So, and I'm not talking about recent stuff that we did, but sometime in the past. But it's still relevant from a consumer segment standpoint. So the insight was that when you look at youth, okay, and in the adage when you say friends and family, there is a reason why friends come first and family comes later, right? It's not family and friends; it's friends and family. So for the youth, friends are paramount, and not all friends are equal. Okay, so you've got your own group of buddies, and the cohesion of this group stays for a very long time. So we picked that up, and we said, okay, what does this group do, right? I mean, and to anybody in the audience, even now, how many people do you tend to call on a regular basis? You can count them on one hand, okay? Especially from a friend standpoint. So we picked that up and we said, look at it. We created a product which we said is going to cater to that particular need of people wanting to talk to their buddies, sharing amongst themselves. So you created a product which had a free voice to a particular segment, a data pooling for that particular segment. And we marketed it at colleges and saying this is for your group of buddies. So it's not targeted to any youth or all youth, but it is targeted to a specific segment. The distribution channel was different, the entire marketing campaign was different, and that led to a big surge in terms of the youth coming to the brand and sort of picking it up. So to my mind, always find what is the insight to a particular consumer segment and then go after it. So that would be my thing.
All right. Amita?
Yeah. I mean, for us, we would want to sort of keep an eye on what is really trending or where the consumers are going and doing more things. So it is not just, let's say, a very binary that, okay, if someone is going and shopping from grocery or a medical shop, they'll continue to do that. So we'll have to keep an eye on, okay, there'll be plus, 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 plus. Maybe they're shopping right now from here, but probably there could be another alternate option. So for example, the classic case of quick commerce. Now, earlier, we used to be in an era of having a monthly shopping list, which most households will make and say that, अच्छा ये मेरा ये month का grocery का list है. But eventually now it has turned into, okay, when modern trade kicked in, and all the organized outlets like a Reliance Retail or a D-Mart, when these retail outlets got popular, it again was like, okay, there came a new sort of a subset, which is like, okay, Super Sundays. So the Sundays are really busy versus a weekdays slightly calmer in such outlets. And when quick commerce came in, it actually shifted the consumer buying from only Sundays, or rather most Sundays, to the payday. Now everything is really focused on when the salaries kick in, you know that the splurge is going to happen. And again, with all these quick commerce coming in, most of the brands would start saying that, okay, from the first day of the month to 10th or the barely second week of the month, that is when the maximum spends happen. So brands like us, we have to be very, very vigilant of how these shifts are taking place. Make sure that our brands are available, make sure that we are available to the consumer, and then really sort of navigate these changes. While the rest, whatever is there, is still there. It does not stop. But you're constantly being part of that wave.
I also believe, Amita, since you've been part of the social media piece also, one learning that I've got in my past is listening to the consumer helps a lot in understanding, and just not, one is listening and one is interacting.
Yeah.
Right? On the social media side also, in my past experience where, if there has been I've managed a IPL team, social media, and we have had fans of the rival IPL team following us saying that we follow you just because you reply to us. That's all. So we have a huge chunk of people over there just saying that you guys interact with us, that's all we need. And that creates a lot of, brand value itself for us. And I think those are things that are learnings, for
No,
all of us.
absolutely. If you look at some of the good brands, right? I mean, those brands, I mean, all brands make mistakes. I mean, everybody makes mistakes because these brands are really managed by human beings only. So it's not like, you don't make mistake. It's really good brands or brands which really stick around because, and people have high regards for them, is because they are the ones who take ownership, or they are the ones who communicate back with you. They are the ones who really quickly correct things and fixes it. Not because it's good for PR, but it's because that they genuinely care. So I think that makes a lot of difference. I've seen that personally, yeah.
Got it. All right. So I have just a couple of questions left. We discussed challenges earlier. I'll look into opportunities right now. And with respect to opportunities, I want to focus on probably something which, Mr. Sidwani also discussed in the first session, which is the role of AI, technology, and all of these aspects. So Ashish, if you can just help me in understanding, in your experience or in general, what role does technology play in helping serve multiple various, segments? Or in general, in terms of where has technology gone forward right now, and if there are, with respect to Adani electricity, have you had those experiences in terms of usage of technology to cater to specific user segments? It might not be the regular answer of mid-journey because it's nothing to do with creatives, but AI has different forms of reaching out to people also.
No, see, to my mind, brand building is all about consumer experience, right? How is the consumer experiencing your brand, right? And the interactions and how he feels during those interactions is what then ends up in creating the brand persona. So from a technology standpoint, right? How do we give a seamless experience to our customer? I mean, when was the last time that you had an electricity outage in the city, right? And we cater to about 80% of the Mumbai electricity. Even if you are a Tata customer, the network on which the electricity is being supplied. So Tata has about 7 odd lakh consumers, 5 lakh of them sit on my network. So network reliability becomes extremely important. And how do you do that? So you invest in a lot of back-end systems to be able to ensure that you have state-of-the-art smart grids that then ensure that if at all there is an outage, then you are able to reroute electricity, and that is done at a blink of an eye. So the consumer doesn't realize that the power is stripped and he's been rerouted, and then you go and sort it out. So those are some of the stuff that you end up doing from a technology standpoint, from a consumer experience standpoint as well. The other thing that we are looking at is also segment our customers into, let's say, commercial and industrial. These are the guys who require electricity 24/7, who require quality of electricity. And when I say quality of electricity, most of us don't sort of seem to understand it. but there are voltage fluctuations and so on and so forth. How do you regulate that? And how do you ensure that data centers, etc., don't have that outage? So we deploy specific solutions to ensure that these consumers are serviced in a manner that there is absolutely no outage or absolutely no voltage fluctuations that sort of come in.
Got it.
So that is that. The other thing that we are also doing is relying heavily on generative AI. So it's not that we don't use AI.
Nice.
Yeah, it's a category that is less involved. But I come from telecom for donkey's years, so you can't sort of kill it. So what we are doing is we are also changing the way that we communicate with our consumers, bringing in more youth, bringing in more fresh energy, more contemporary conversations in the way that we communicate to our consumers. So that's a change that is sort of coming in. And we're looking at is using specific creatives for specific segments, iterating it as fast as possible. So follow a fail fast sort of a strategy to see what is working for what segment. Because this is something that we've not explored or nobody else has explored in this category.
Yes.
So that's something that we are exploring.
Okay.
Let's see where we go.
Great. Yeah. I think that's why I asked the question also to specifically to you, because I wanted to know, I think all of us have seen different variations of AI in terms of, technology and programmatic and trying to find out, to reach out to user segments. But I wanted to know in terms of how Adani Electricity is looking into this piece and, getting into the next steps of it. Okay, last question. I think every marketeer's role is at the end of the day, while we are doing all of these things, reaching user segments, creating content, the quintessential question, ROI kya hai, right? At the end of the day, if you're doing all of these things. So, Sapna, if you can just help me in just closing the entire piece and letting me know, how do you approach ROI analysis, when approaching, multiple marketing strategies, and especially with respect to user segments?
Okay, great. It's a good question to close on, I guess. So I think for ROI, and yes, being in financial services, it's a very important part of any marketer's role, and any marketer actually, any sector. I think the key thing would be to define the KPIs at start. For each campaign, if you have got your KPIs defined, smaller campaigns, long-term campaign, so on. So I think that's like a good start on the whole ROI measurement journey. Also, I think especially for performance marketers and brand, so when you're managing your entire annual calendar, how do you link up your performance and brand goals together, so that you of course have your month-on-month sales volume sticking, your leads, your conversions, ratios sticking, so take care of the e-com channel. So that's of course a very sharper, clear, goal-driven business target achievement, lead cost, thing that runs this. That's your shop that you're running. And along with that, how do you really match the long-term ROI that you are driving? So having a long-term focus on ROI is the influence that any marketing person should be able to drive within the organization. It's not an easy one. But trying to make sure that you kind of pitch it more in a long-term investment, slow, steady build, so that you partner on the business goals. I think that space, balanced space for a marketer to strike. Not that you want to always be at a high spend, but as long as you're able to partner the business to achieve the business plan, for that year. And I think marketing now spans beyond just, the traditional campaigns, but I think, into product design. I think my colleagues also talked about customer experience, looking at different segments and saying, okay, this is a segment we should go off. So these all become, various campaigns, and, then you can build an entire ROI that you can drive through that. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, panelists, for having a great discussion. I hope you guys also had a great time, at least I'm listening to all of these inputs. I had a great time. Thank you, folks.